It's very hard. Be careful, man.
Oh, this is a happening. It's Rogers Park, West Rogers Park night at Max and Benny's restaurant.
My sister has the recipe.
There are very few places left in the Chicago area that are Hamish. It's a lot of nostalgia for our grandparents and our parents in the old neighborhoods.
I was in the class of 1963. I finished school, I got married, and we moved to an apartment to Sheridan where our friends were moving.
It's like Bubby.
We bought a home in Highland Park, and that's what happened.
After I graduated, I moved out to the northwest suburbs. And that's where I've been since 1972. Most of us, I don't think, maybe one or two stayed in the city. Everybody moved out to the suburbs. Raising your kids and all that, they all went to Barrington school districts and all that, great education.
It was a wonderful way to grow up when you could just go knocking at your neighbor's door and say, come out and play. That was a wonderful memory for me.
When Irish immigrant Philip Rogers in the mid-1800s purchased 1,600 acres straddling the ridge 10 miles north of the booming city of Chicago, little did he know that his name would trigger a debate that lingers to this day. Some people insist on calling the area west of Ridge, West Ridge. But to Jewish Chicagoans, it will always be West Rogers Park. The early settlers were German and Luxembourger farmers who hauled their produce to market in a daily 3-hour trek down what would become Lincoln Avenue. Residential and commercial development expanded into the area in the 1920s. In the 30s, Jews started moving into apartments and bungalows east of California and mostly south of Devon. The first synagogue, Ner Tamid, a conservative congregation, was built on California and Rosemont in 1938. B'nai Jacob, also conservative, was built on Artesian and Granville in 1942.
After World War II, West Rogers Park had sort of a status. This was a very desirable area. And so it started growing very rapidly. And in the 50s, it was the fastest growing area in the city of Chicago.
A single-family housing boom transformed the prairie. By 1963, the Jewish population exploded to more than 47,000, nearly 75% of the neighborhood. The Bernard Horwich Jewish Community Center had opened in 1960, and West Rogers Park boasted 12 synagogues of all denominations.
Our family was conservative. My husband and I wanted the children to be with Jewish people. So we moved to West Rogers Park. The shopping was wonderful. The dress stores were beautiful, and the shops for young girls had beautiful clothes.
Many of the parents of Jews who settled in West Rogers Park traveled a similar route to get there.
My parents were from Russia, and my dad came first, and after he made a little money, he brought my mother over. My dad had a business manufacturing caps on Maxwell Street. It was a lot of fun for me because there were men in front of the stores trying to pull customers in. It was so funny being on Maxwell Street. I don't know how it was for my parents, but for me it was a happy place.
By 1933, Chicago was the third largest Jewish city in the world, with some 280,000 Jewish residents. Nearly 120,000 lived in the area known as the Old West Side, primarily in Lawndale.
The bulk of the Jews who moved into West Rogers Park, they came from various neighborhoods, but especially from Lawndale.
The neighborhood was safe. I was never afraid to walk home. We lived in a court building and no air conditioning. So in the summer, when it was very hot, everybody from the building took their pillows and they went to sleep on the boulevard. It was just a lot of community fun.
There was a trend to have a home of your own. And Lawndale had very few single-family homes. It was 2 flats, 3 flats, apartments. And once Jews started moving out, the neighborhood started changing racially. In a matter of 10 years, the area changed from completely Jewish to virtually completely African American.
The Jewish people were leaving the West Side. They were all going north, or they were going south, but they all started to leave. So we left too.
My family moved into West Rogers Park in 1947. I was 6 weeks old. We lived on Francisco between Albion and North Shore, and our house was the only house on the block. They started to build houses right away, and by the time I was 6, there were houses up and down the block. Every house was a 2-parent, 2-child family, 99% Jewish. I went to Boone School. My parents joined Ner Tamid. They didn't go to services, but my brother did go to Hebrew school. All the kids in the neighborhood, all the kids on the block went to Ner Tamid. After that, my parents joined a Reform synagogue, Menorah, because they sent me to confirmation class. Mather High School was wonderful. I loved high school. At the time, it was the premier high school anywhere in the city. We all went to the neighborhood school. You couldn't go anywhere but your neighborhood school. We used to walk up and down Devon Avenue every Saturday, walking in and out of stores. Carol Core was the shop that all the girls liked to go to. Sitting at Randall's or at Cofield's and having fries and a Coke. We would take a bus to the Granada or to the Northtown. We used to go to Red Hot Ranch. There were all sorts of places just to hang out and to meet the boys as you were walking down the street. It was a very social time. We had clubs. I belonged to a club called Cindella's, but then we had bigger clubs, and you had to sort of try out to get into a club. Devon's was a club that I was in. Deb's I was in. Ravens was a boys club, and they had a dance called Raven's Sweetheart, and every club put a girl up for Raven's Sweetheart, and then they picked the sweetheart at the dance, and it was at a big hotel downtown. We always got dressed up. We went to all sorts of fancy places. We went to Mr. Kelly's. We went to the Empire Room. We went to hotels. Before my parents ever even went to a hotel, I had gone to a hotel.
My parents moved from Albany Park to West Rogers Park in 1966, south of Pratt. There were two shuls west of California that had mechitzas. The next shul to move in was our shul. My father bought a property on Whipple in the 6700 block, and that's where we davened after that. It was a very, very pleasant place to shop and a very, very pleasant place to live.
In 1973, an Indian sari store found an opening on Devon Avenue. And so that started a trend of other sari stores coming.
By 1973, the Jewish population dropped significantly to roughly 30,000.
Younger Jews especially weren't tied to the community as much as the older Jews had been. Some of them started moving out of the West Rogers Park area.
There was a very scary incident that occurred in the middle 1970s. Swastikas were painted on every major Jewish building in the community one night. Jewish war veterans from World War II volunteered to stand guard overnight with sidearms, with guns, at the buildings to protect them. A group of leaders in the community, my father, Eugene Matenki, one of them, they created the Jewish Community Council of West Rogers Park, and instead of just being defensive, they became proactive.
They created a fund worth the equivalent today of nearly $500,000 to help young couples buy homes in West Rogers Park.
People started buying homes. The fact that the synagogues in the community put that kind of money into the bank, it made a statement that was heard loud and clear. We are not running, we are staying here as a Jewish community.
West Rogers Park differs from the other Jewish communities where the people just left, abandoned everything.
West Rogers Park became, much more orthodox than it had before, and you had conservative and reform shuls closing and being picked up as Jewish institutions by those that were living there.
We had the opportunity to buy some beautiful buildings. I learned at 10 o'clock in the morning that Ner Tamid, which had been vacant for a number of years, they wished to sell the synagogue. By 11:30, I was there with members of Yeshivat Tiferes Tzvi.
I had a vision. I could literally close my eyes and see a campus on that whole street. And I figured one of these days we're going to go all the way to the corner and be the neighbors to Tel Aviv Pizza.
Yeshivat Tiferes Tzvi would not have been able to spend over $20 million in remodeling Ner Tamid and enlarging it without the Jewish Federation of Metropolitan Chicago.
There is no federation in the country that supports its Jewish day schools like this federation does.
And we were able to put up a magnificent building with all the bells and whistles that a school should have. With the help of Alderman Silverstein, we have special parking for the buses and to be able to load and unload the children. It's just a wonderful feeling to see new birth and regeneration in our area.
In recent years, the Jewish population in West Rogers Park started growing again. Jews are moving into the neighborhood from the East Coast and other U.S. communities, and even Chicago's suburbs.
When we lived in Deerfield, our main Jewish involvement was the Soviet Jewry movement. My wife Pam became the president of the national organization. We probably enjoyed one of our very first Shabbos dinners at an apartment in Moscow. That trip had a very big effect on us because when we came home, we said to ourselves, what can we do, what can we start to do that's going to bring more Judaism into our lives? We decided to kosher our house because we said, why not? Why we should be doing this? Pam and I were left in a position of, what are we going to do now? Where are we going to find a community? Are we going to stay in Deerfield? Are we going to go to Highland Park? And that's how we wound up in West Rogers Park.
There were a few points in the history of the Jewish community of West Rogers Park that defined the future of the Jewish community. In the end of December of 1992, Shabbos Hanukkah, the Eruv for West Rogers Park became operational. Having an Eruv in a Jewish community was essential to being able to attract young Jewish families with little children. 1 year before, there was an Eruv established in Skokie, and people were waiting to see, and they weren't going to wait too long, whether West Rogers Park would be able to have an Eruv or if they'd be looking to move out of the community. The establishment of the West Rogers Park Eruv took a lot of people doing a lot of work. It was not without controversy, but it changed the future of the Jewish community in West Rogers Park. 1992, Alderman Bernie Stone backed all of the legislation we needed from the city, and he got the city council to amend the zoning ordinance to allow Jewish families in West Rogers Park to put large additions on the existing home stock, back-end additions on 3-bedroom Georgians, popping the roofs on raised ranches. He saw that if he changed the zoning ordinance, and anybody in the city could use the benefit of that zoning change, families who had 5 and 6 and 7 and 8 kids would not have to look elsewhere for housing. Larger Jewish families were enticed to be able to stay, to add on, to invest in the community.
And those people that are downsizing their homes, many have sold their homes to younger families and moved into Winston Towers. So we're managed to keep our people in the neighborhood.
Yet, to many Jews, the closing in 2010 of Rosenblum's bookstore seemed to symbolize a losing battle.
I grew up in Uptown. I came back to Chicago in retirement after having been gone for 40 years. Walking down Devon from California to Kedzie, I saw abandoned storefronts, I saw torn awnings, I saw filthy windows. I saw a vision of a neighborhood in decline. And yet if you went on the side streets, you saw a neighborhood that was still building, still growing, institutions building anew. And I thought, whoa, what's going on here? How could it be that you would be making that investment on the one hand, and on the other hand, ignoring the markers of a declining neighborhood? My first reaction was, what's anybody doing about this? It doesn't make any sense.
We were very fortunate that Howard Rieger retired and moved to Chicago.
That was the beginning of a new phase of life for JCC WRP.
Okay, we're here for the groundbreaking of Park 526 on Devon and McCormick. A site that was vacant for over 12 years or so, suddenly going to be transformed into the newest park in the city of Chicago.
No one had been able to overcome an obstacle imposed by state statute.
It was controlled by the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, and by law they had to either get a rental rate or a purchase price that was mandated by appraisal. And the property was worth millions of dollars, and nobody could pay that price. And that's why the movie theater went out of business and the car wash went out of business, because they closed down the parking lot and said, if you don't pay us, you can't use it. We brought together about 150 people at B'nai Ruvain one night. We invited the executive director of the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, David St. Pierre, to come. And for a half hour before the meeting, he and I were just sitting there chatting, and he said, well, what do you want me to do? And I said, how about a park? He said, well, nobody ever asked us that. Yeah, I could give that land to the Chicago Park District, and you could have a park.
When David St. Pierre announced that, hey, you want a park? I'll get you a park, everybody cheered, everybody went wild.
We hit on the idea of, whoa, what if we could get 1 or 2 home-based businesses that people operate out of the basements of their houses to come above ground and occupy an empty store or 2 or 3?
We identified retail space where they'd be able to actually open for business. We worked on a marketing plan. We worked on a lease negotiation. We worked on signage designs. We helped them promote their anniversary sale.
It's really cute.
We put out the idea that wouldn't it be great if we could get a new library for West Rogers Park? And we were one of the founders of a coalition that came together, took up that issue.
And a new library will be built at the corner of Pratt and Western Avenue.
We are cleaning up the trails along the Chicago River, and this is our special trail in West Rogers Park. And many people are Sabbath observers. So here in West Rogers Park, we celebrate Chicago River Day on Sunday. You can see how there's like a bunch of trails mixed in. What we're standing on is the second iteration.
It's a park. It has no name. It's Park 538. It has 3 miles of hiking trails that weave in and out through the park. And nobody knows it's there because it has no sign. It has no entry points.
A proposal by JCC WRP to develop Park 538 for environmental education and recreation has been green-lighted as part of the Great Rivers Chicago Plan.
I think the council has just produced some great results, and I think its impact is going to be felt for decades to come.
We've had this major streetscape going on Devon Avenue, and we're on our final stages right now. I really think that the new look of Devon Avenue is really beautiful. We're going to start a marketing campaign for Devon Avenue. So we want to reach more and more people and encourage them to come out to Devon, either to shop or to open up a business as well. The thing that I'm most proud of in the 50th Ward is our diversity. And we all get along. If the rest of the world could look at us and see how we get along and start behaving like we behave, we would all be in a better place.
My friends used to not even want to come into the neighborhood. They thought they would feel out of place. I still love the neighborhood. My kids always laugh about this. I used to say to them, I don't keep Shabbos, but I used to sit in the window and say, see these people walking down the street? This is something I really like. The moms and dads holding hands with the little kids, walking down the middle of the street and talking to each other.
As I look at the trend of Chicago Jewish history, I see that what's unique about West Rogers Park is that after 80 or 90 years, it's expanding as a Jewish community. In less than half a century, the other big Jewish communities had disappeared completely.
Happy Purim!
It's hard to look into the future, but I could see for at least a couple decades or so, it's going to remain a strong Jewish community.